We have something my creator needs. It's a key that would free him.
The importance of cosmic entities in the Marvel Universe is paramount, but somehow they don't get the same importance in the MCU. We've only seen glimpses of cosmic entities in earlier live-action appearances, and the debut of Knull in Venom: The Last Dance might just open up a new arena. For those who are not so familiar with Knull, he is a dark force of nature and the creator and lord of symbiotes. His appearance in the movie might also lead to a greater role in the MCU going ahead, but for the purposes of this video, we're more concerned with the unique physiological details of this entity. Is he really immortal? How does he create symbiotes? You'll find the answers to these and many more going ahead. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How did Knull come into existence, and what is his true nature? Now that you've probably grasped the idea of Knull being a cosmic entity, it should be easier to comprehend that he has existed since the beginning of time. Knull existed in darkness when it was all that ever existed. After the emergence of light, his existence was threat and he struggled to find his own reign for eons. Meanwhile, the Celestials were building space with light and darkness and found a tough opposition. Once Knull regained his position as one of the Dark Lords, he plunged his hand right into one of the giant gods, and this is how he pulled out a proto-symbiote which he turned into a special sword that could be used to kill Celestials. For his daring act of defiance, the space gods banished him back into the void of the one he killed, but it didn't really stop the endeavor of Knull. Thus, the true purpose of Knull is quite simple, and it is destruction of the world and universe of light as we know it. Someone who has reveled in darkness for eternity finds comfort in the dark side of the universe, and that's exactly what he seeks to usher in through his endeavors. What is the basic physiology of Knull like? As a godlike entity, Knull has a kind of divine physiology with some unique features. He is the unchallenged primordial god of darkness, and by virtue of this, his superhuman powers are far more than humans and even some of the other divine entities. Not only is he the creator of the All-Black Necrosword, one of the mightiest weapons in the Marvel Universe, but he can also possess some of the same powers that it bestows upon its host, and even more. There seems to be a metaphysical link between Knull and the undead corpse of the Celestial that he killed, and this feeds him with a constant source of power through the Necrosword as a medium. In return, the souls of those killed by him are assimilated, and they serve as a grotesque afterlife. When the Valkyries managed to sever this connection, Knull was considerably weakened, but even his weakened form was powerful enough to take on the likes of All-Father Thor and other powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe. Also, it's worth noting that his divine physiology grants him certain other powers as well, such as the ability to create, control, and manipulate the living void. The living void is basically a fount of eldritch darkness, and this is a manifestation of the primordial void that has been existing even before the universe. This power came in quite handy during an instance when the Earth was invaded by Knull and he engulfed the entire Earth in a dome of living abyss and blocked out all forms of light. How does Knull actually create symbiotes? What makes him the god of symbiotes? Every time we talk about Knull, he's regarded as the god of symbiotes, and this is quite a crucial part of his mission, where he has warred against the light. Now, in order to understand how he can create symbiotes, we've delved a little more into his backstory. After he made a home out of the head of the Celestial he killed, he created the first sword-shaped symbiotes from his own form. This was the earliest symbiote created by him, and this was not really perfect. It's said that the first symbiote that he created was actually made from his own shadow. However, he realized the true extent of his ability to use symbiotes during his encounter with Gore, who later became the God Butcher. Knull was out killing beings of light with his All-Black Necrosword, and after crashing into Gore's planet, the latter took off with the weapon. Knull was stuck in this planet, and this is when he realized the utility of a symbiotic relationship with certain creatures or hosts. Knull could pilot and monitor them remotely, and he discovered that his true power lay in exploiting the hive mind of symbiote agents. He learned to bestow an aspect of his essence into another creature, and this allowed him to control the symbiotes from great distances if required. From a Dark Lord, he became an intergalactic despot because of the hive mind that allowed him to enhance his powers greatly. Such is the impact of Knull that he can mentally influence and dominate the symbiotes even when he's sealed away. This causes the symbiotes to be driven by insane bloodlust and hunger. Knull is also able to see through their eyes as a part of his remote piloting abilities, and he can manipulate their biomass even even when he's not in direct contact with them. The symbiotes that are infected by Knull are usually much more powerful than their counterparts who have been disconnected from the hive mind, and those controlled by him even develop new powers and abilities along the way. Another crucial aspect of Knull that asserts his dominance over symbiotes is that he's able to forcibly remove them from their hosts by physically blasting them or even removing them with his bare hands. What caused Knull to lose his connection with symbiotes? Things were going great for Knull until Thor stepped in and jeopardized his plans significantly. He attacked one of his minions, and this served the connection that Knull had developed with his symbiotes. With time, these symbiotes, who were almost like his children, became charmed by the gift of light and its nature. They planned to imprison Knull in a planet called Clintar, and the creator of symbiotes was now trapped. Many of these symbiotes now took on new hosts, and some even realized the evil nature of their former master. The idea to imprison Knull in Clintar worked wonders, until it didn't, and he managed to free himself. Now, from the glimpses of the trailer of Venom 3, it's not quite clear how powerful Knull is following his return, but the likes of Eddie Brock and the others will surely find out. Is the All-Black Necrosword a part of Knull? How was it created? The Necrosword is one of the deadliest weapons in the entire Marvel Universe, and it's capable of killing the gods as well. This immensely powerful sword was created by Knull himself. Following his recruitment as the King in Black by the Celestials, he went on to create the first symbiote from his shadow and shaped it into a sword. This was then used to behead one of the Celestials, and after this heinous act, Knull was banished by the other Celestials inside the head of the Celestial that he slayed. The remnants of the divine powers of the slain Celestial also made the Necrosword powerful. To explain it in its simplest terms, this sword has been created from living darkness. Thus, it's indeed a part of Knull, and carries a part of his powers alongside the divine abilities of the Celestial and the dark nature of its forging. When Knull wielded this sword, he was almost unstoppable, and he killed godly beings like they were flies. Even when Gore took his sword and went on a killing spree, he required some stopping before the rampage could be halted. The All-Black Necrosword was metaphysically tethered to the decapitated corpse of the Celestial, which was trapped in the realm between, and for this reason, the ones who were killed by the Necrosword had their souls trapped in this realm, which served as their afterlife. Knull's injury in a battle against a group of gods caused the All-Black to leave him and bond with Gore, which suggests a thinking mind of the All-Black. It then found and corrupted Gore, and turned him into an evil god who could slay others using the supreme powers of the sword. Essentially, the All-Black Necrosword is partly a symbiote that's made from Knull himself, and it's right up there with the finest weapons that you may have encountered in the Marvel Universe. What is so special about Knull's symbiote armor? We've spoken about the special symbiote armor created by Knull, and now is the time to dive into the details of his unique equipment. He created this suit of symbiote armor after forging the Necrosword, and he did so from the living abyss. Originally, the armor appeared to be in solid black, but he later added a red dragon emblem on the suit after founding the Symbiote Imperium. The true powers and abilities of this armor are never revealed, but we do believe that it allows him to shapeshift in various ways, a subject that we will discuss later in this video. The constituent matter of the symbiote armor was used to create all the lesser symbiotes, and we can assume that it had similar abilities. Just like the symbiotes, even the armor was vulnerable to intense heat and sounds. When Knull was imprisoned, his symbiote armor was ripped from him, but this was only temporary. Immediately after he awakened, he reformed the symbiote armor and even forged himself a specially shaped helmet with horns. What is the true extent of Knull's superhuman strength? It must be quite clear by now that this god-level entity is ultra-powerful, but what about his raw physical strength? Well, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Knull has superhuman strength, the likes of which cannot be matched by some of the toughest superheroes out there. He can decapitate a celestial being with a single blow, and previously, he has slaughtered entire armies of gods powered by the Unipower. Of course, the Necrosword plays a key role in his incredible strength, and so does his symbiote armor, which keeps the steady supply of power from the Celestial that he killed. Just to give you a small example of his brute physical strength, he has once manhandled the Silver Surfer even though it was after Norrin greatly exhausted his cosmic power. Even Sentry fared no better against Knull, and this is one of the world's strongest superheroes that we're talking about. Also, as we've discussed before, the powers of Knull were so incredible that even after the Valkyries dealt him a major blow by severing his metaphysical connection with the Celestial, he was still powerful enough to fight and defeat Thor, the god of thunder. The symbiotes created by Knull only have a fraction of the powers that he is gifted with, and even the symbiotes prove to be quite a handful, and this can be a great indicator of the extent of powers possessed by the undisputed god of symbiotes. How durable is Knull? What kind of attacks can he withstand? If someone's able to survive being blasted by Celestials, it's enough evidence that the individual is unbelievably durable. Knull has withstood the wrath of the Celestials after he went rogue, and some of the instances that document his fights with other divine entities show how durable he can be. During a fight with one such deity, Knull plunged through the atmosphere of a planet from space, and all this while, he was still engaged in combat. He was rendered unconscious after he was stabbed in the head by the deity, but even that failed to kill him. From what we understood, Knull does experience various forms of pain, such as the time when Ego blasted him with psionic beams. The power cosmic of the Silver Surfer also led him to bleed, and Knull was visibly injured. On another occasion, Knull sustained a brutal injury when Thor's Mjolnir ripped apart his lower jaw, but he was able to withstand this as well, something that cannot be said for most of Thor's enemies. None of these attacks were effective enough to cause a serious injury that threatened Knull, let alone complete destruction of the Dark God. Could the symbiotes created by Knull corrupt any superhero? From whatever little we've seen, the symbiotes have their unique abilities, and some of them include the power to take over certain individuals completely. In this state, they have little control over their own mind and body, and we've seen the likes of Spider-Man suffer the same under the influence of Venom. Similarly, there's an instance in the comic books where Hulk barely escapes being enslaved by Knull's symbiotes. Even a weakened Hulk manages to deter the attack, but there was another instance where Bruce Banner's angry alter ego was actually assimilated by a symbiote in order to become the Venom Hulk. This particular feature of the symbiotes and their ability to do something so dreadful makes Knull even more dangerous. None of the superheroes or even the supervillains are actually safe from his influence, and he could simply make a puppet out of the most powerful beings out there.
My home has found us. We have something my creator needs.
Why are the symbiotes created by Knull susceptible to high sonic frequencies and fire? It's well established by now that all symbiotes have a common weakness to high sonic frequencies and fire. However, the reason behind these weaknesses has never really been laid out in simple terms. In reality, this common shortcoming of the symbiotes goes back to their origins. When Knull first created the Necrosword, he inevitably ended up creating these two weaknesses as well. Every symbiote that followed simply inherited the weaknesses, but in varied degrees. For instance, it turned into a psychosomatic weakness, where the symbiotes could overcome the same depending on occasions. When the host is in berserker rage mode, or the degree of urgency is supreme, the weaknesses can be temporarily handled. We've also observed a natural resistance built over time. As for the reason behind the particular weaknesses of high-pitched sound and fire, it could be because of the nature of forging the first symbiote. When Knull created symbiotes, he used his own blood, and symbiotes were probably scared of the fire of the forge and the high-pitched sound of Knull's hammer. When the first symbiotes were born, it's normal for them to have felt fear, and every time they encounter a high-pitched noise or fire, they're reminded of the time they were created and haplessly scared. This also explains why these weaknesses are more psychological than anything, and can be dealt with in case of emergencies. Fire or strong sounds can do no real damage to the symbiotes, except for inducing an overwhelming fear and irritation. Is Knull truly immortal? For someone who's existed for over 13.7 billion years, the word immortality comes quite naturally, and it is a question that many fans have in mind. There's no clear answer to this, but every bit of evidence suggests that Knull is someone we can regard as truly immortal. Of course, he can sustain injuries and be faced with an existence threat once in a blue moon, but even the injuries that seemingly incapacitate him are not enough to kill him. Some of the more serious injuries have taken hundreds of years to heal, but they have healed nonetheless. One of the most brutal damages ever experienced by Knull was the time when Eddie Brock used the power of the God of Light and completely disintegrated him. It almost seemed like he was destroyed permanently, but even this he survived and lived to fight another day. Venom almost landed a killing blow when he plunged his hand into the sun and used the unipower to vaporize Knull, but even then he survived. By definition, you call someone an immortal when they cannot die or cannot be killed, and both are true for Knull. While he does age and grows older, it hardly leaves an impact on his physical existence. And if he isn't an immortal deity, we don't know who is. Does Knull have healing abilities? For someone who's an immortal entity and recovers from grievous injuries, the presence of regenerative healing powers is quite obvious. The real question is the extent of these powers, and the results that we found are quite impressive in this regard. Knull can be injured quite severely, and yet he can recover from them with time. In fact, it has been hinted that Knull can actually recover from fatal injuries that would kill other gods. The regeneration time varies depending on the damage done to him. For instance, after being devastated by Ego, Knull took hundreds of years to regain his original form. On the other hand, he recovered from a seemingly dangerous injury after Thor blasted a hole in his hand in a matter of seconds. One thing that Knull did not heal from was his destroyed lower jaw courtesy of Thor, and for this, he had to depend on the prosthesis. How do Knull's shapeshifting abilities work? Knull doesn't need stealth given how powerful he is, but he can still be a master of deception thanks to his exceptional shapeshifting abilities. These are probably derived from his symbiote armor, and these also allow him the power of flight because he can conjure wings at any moment. Not only can he influence and control the symbiotes and their forms remotely, but he can also shapeshift himself. Knull can transform his human-like mouth into fanged jaws with an elongated tongue, which gives him a rather intimidating appearance. What are some of the things that can weaken Knull? Does this near indestructible and immortal god of darkness have a chink in his armor? Well, as surprising as this may be, Knull does come with his share of weaknesses that can be exploited against him. One of his foremost weaknesses is the force of the light, which came into existence following the Big Bang and then spread across the universe by the Celestials. This has often been used against Knull, and his attempt to destroy and corrupt the light failed. Another flaw in Knull's otherwise perfect system is the fact that he can be damaged if a symbiote that he is remote piloting is damaged. We've spoken about the time Thor punched a hole through his hands, and what actually happened was that a symbiote piloted by him sustained the hit. There have been many other instances where corresponding wounds appeared on Knull after his puppet symbiote was injured. It's quite ironic that one of Knull's greatest strengths is also a major weakness that he encounters. His powerful hive mind can be infiltrated, and when this happens, it causes him a lot of pain. Also, the symbiotes under his control are greatly affected because of this. Even his celestial connection with the Headless Celestial can be used against him, which we've seen the Valkyries do in order to weaken him to some extent. How does Knull fare in comparison to Kang the Conqueror and Thanos? Although the existence of Knull dates back to the beginning of the universe, the character is fairly new to the Marvel Universe, having been introduced in 2018 for the first time. Those who follow the MCU rigorously will vouch for the stature of Thanos as a formidable villain. Kang may not have been utilized properly, but even he's an incredible adversary in the comic books. Thus, it remains an interesting question for the fans how Knull compares against the likes of them. Just for the purpose of revising your memories, Thanos enhanced his powers after collecting the Infinity Stones in the MCU, and he could toy with the entire team of Marvel superheroes without breaking a sweat in his prime. Meanwhile, Kang grew up to be exceptionally intelligent, and he forged a new universe altogether where he reigned supreme. Both of them are incredibly powerful in their own right, but there is one thing that puts them below Knull if you truly try to compare them. However, let us clarify that this discussion is purely speculative, because the Marvel lore has yet to pit them against each other, which will promise to be a fun confrontation. Firstly, Knull is darkness personified, and as a cosmic entity, the only true parallel that we can think of is the Enigma Force, which is a god of light. Meanwhile, Thanos can be an agent of death itself, but Knull can channelize the dead and continue to grow stronger without ever dying. Whether or not Knull can defeat the likes of Thanos and Kang is debatable, but it can be said with certainty that he has a clear supremacy when it comes to purely the nature of existence and raw power associated with these enigmatic supervillains. We're also intrigued to find out how the movie appearance deals with Knull, because there can be no easy way to defeat him or have him banished. Let's not forget that Knull is a multiversal being in the comics, and he can easily move through the sacred timeline and hop over to cause chaos during the events of Venom: The Last Dance. Can Knull reproduce? Now, this is a question that can be answered in many ways. For starters, what do we really mean by reproductive here? We have clearly established that Knull can create symbiotes and use them to his advantage. And if you consider the symbiotes to be some kind of living entity, then he does reproduce. However, there is no formal and usual method of reproduction that Knull abides by. For instance, he doesn't have a partner or any offspring, and as a deity with cosmic powers, he's clearly beyond the domain of earthly pleasures. He's not affected affected by lust or urges that are human, and his form of reproduction requires only him and his unique superpowers. Knull is also able to transfer his consciousness into another physical form, which effectively means that he can change bodies at will. But even this doesn't really qualify as reproduction, and the only way you consider that Knull truly reproduces is if you consider the symbiotes created by him to be his literal offspring. Marvelous verdict. Knull could be as big as Thanos in the MCU. Here, we're simply talking from the MCU perspective, and we can't help but notice how there's been a serious lack of a genuine villain ever since Thanos was dealt with in Endgame. Now, with a cosmic entity like Knull, there's another opportunity to create a threat at par with Thanos, something that will require the superheroes to assemble. It's unfortunate that Gore the God Butcher has been killed off after a solitary appearance in Thor: Love and Thunder, because his connection with Knull could also be highlighted in future storylines. Overall, the point to consider here is the opportunity that lies ahead for someone like Knull if only the character is used properly. From the discussion on his anatomical details, it should be clear by now that Knull is not going to be killed off easily, unless the story is an absolute disaster, and we have high hopes on this one. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on the movie, and also share your views on the aspects of Knull's anatomy that have impressed you the most. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.